Okay, so from here on now we'll be recording. So as said, as the first few people are entering, we're gonna be recording this so that we can share this with other participants. A lot of people couldn't make it on the call today, or some of you even maybe weren't on the first call and be watching the recording from the first time. So for that, we're gonna be making a recording of this. So I want to start out welcoming everybody here. And so far, if you have any comments or questions, just be aware that Alicia is monitoring the chat, but when I go full screen when I'm presenting, I don't see what comments or questions you have. So you can also feel free if it seems right just to jump in and ask questions as we go. This is session two, and today we're going to be focused on signals. I'll get into that in just a moment, but before I get into signals, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and give people a lead or catch up on what we did last week, a bit of a recap, especially, well, both rather, for those who were here and those who were not here. So last week we talked about the flipped futures methodology. We sent out late, I guess just this morning, we sent out a link to submit an assignment or an hands-on activity for the flipped futures methodology, where each person can go and try that out and do that with your own scenario. Has anybody already done that? Or maybe after the last class you did that already? Or does anyone have any general questions who was here last week or who watched the video about the flipped futures methodology and what we're doing with that? No? Right. Well, if you do, send me a message, post on the Bosch Alumni Network. You can also message me on WhatsApp. You can message or leave a comment in the Miro board. So those are the key spaces we'll be looking at for muted. We can also do a session soon where if people do have further questions, we could do an office hours session. The other key thing I want to make sure you guys are all familiar with, you've that you've seen the Miro board. I think I've sent you all a link to this in the file or in WhatsApp. It's also the link is to this in the okay. Oh, that's our slides for today. Odd that didn't change. Let's see. This is should have changed to viewing the Miro board now. East. So, what are some questions you guys have so far about signals while I'm getting this changed? Any initial questions about this?
We cannot see any presentation you share if you
That's
are
fine. So I
sharing.
took it down. I'm changing it right now. I'm switching to a different
Okay.
one. Yeah. But do you have questions about it while I'm doing that?
Questions?
Okay,
Why?
good. I've
Why?
got the letters. Please.
No, no, they're fine. That looks very reasonable to to have those future signals and to imagine what might happen. So, but this, of course, then means that you have to know a bit more about the technologies in order to be able to do some
Yeah, so
foresight.
this and that's a very good point. Like you're going to be digging into the field that you know, and what are the things you know about? Because if I start looking at automotive engineering and trying to see what are the signals in that space, and I don't know anything about motors really. I mean, are the basics I need to know to buy a car, but I have no expertise in that area really.
Mm.
So for me, I'm not going to be the right person to pick out signals in that space.
Mm.
Whereas if I look at things in the blockchain space, or I've been doing a lot of work on AI as well, I'll be able to figure out a bit better what could be the signals there. I'm formerly a diplomat, so I might think about geopolitical trends or trends in politics, and maybe I see some political thing happening in Uruguay, and I see how that's going to cause a bigger impact throughout South America. That's a region and a topic I've looked at before. But if I look at a sector that's something I don't know anything about, yeah, I'm not going to be good at getting signals. And again, the signals don't, as you can see from that example, don't only need to be technology. There can be signals of social change, maybe signals that come from regulatory changes from government, maybe changes like like how abortion is still illegal in some countries, or and there can be movements of change in regards to that, movements in regards to gender rights and other issues. So they can be definitely very much social changes as well. Social, political, legal, economic. It doesn't only have to be tech that we're thinking of here. So I'm glad Sebastian brings up that point about about following technology, because that's an important thing to note that we have more than the technology that we think of in this. So we look at the definition, we think of them as early indicators of change, hinting at emerging trends. They're important because they help us anticipate change, give us a competitive edge. And the characteristics, again, this is what we've talked about in the last slides already. They're novel, but also they're observable and they have potential for significant impact. The reason I say observable, you could use something like a signal that's giving you ideas that doesn't exist yet. And we'll have some examples we'll talk about in there too. But in general, a signal should be something you can already observe. Like it's a gray area, for example, if we say looking in a nerdy topic, let's look back at Star Trek. We look at the communicator devices, these handheld devices that they could talk from the surface of a planet back to their spaceship on, and they could find their location based on those. They're actually doing a lot less activity than what our cell phones can do today. Is that a signal because it was a trend, it was an idea that was talked about in film? Or is it not a signal because it wasn't something observable yet? It's kind of a gray area because we could observe it in film, we could observe that concept of how it would work, but it wasn't there yet. And this is partly, though, why science fiction ends up being a big area people look at for signals as well. So, how do we use these signals? We look at, again, their relevance, their novelty, their potential impact. We also look at how much can we verify them? Are they just purely imaginative that we're so far from those things ever happening? Or is it a signal that, hey, my industry might have this in 10 years? Like maybe we talk about nuclear fission and we say like, oh, maybe this new form of energy coming from nuclear is actually going to exist in 10 years. There's researchers actually working on that. Or when we talk about an AI personal assistant that can plan everything for you, maybe that's even closer in the future as we look at how much AI can do for us already. So there's some clue that makes us believe, hey, this is likely to be possible. It's not, this is just an idea somewhere out there, but it's something where we see some evidence that technology is starting to go that way, or society is starting to go that way, or there's some motion that brings us in the direction that makes us believe it could be possible. So again, how do we find signals? We cast a pretty wide net. I think as the point was made, if you look at maybe more fields you know about, that then you're going to be more likely to pick up signals because you know what the outliers are in the fields you work on. At the same time, you still might want to look at different fields, areas outside of your expertise. And maybe you will see there's something that sounds so big it's going to change the way you live or the way you work. Again, the example I gave about automobiles. Yes, I'm no expert on automotive engines, but if I read an article and I see that maybe Teslas or other electric cars are going to be so much less expensive in 5 years than diesel or normal gas cars, or if I see how they're increasing the fuel efficiency or some other news story that's maybe in simplified non-tech terms, non-engineering tech terms, then I can see, wow, that's going to change the way transportation works for me. Or if we see some story about the feasibility of flying cars and that flying cars might exist in 5 years, again, that's something that I don't need to know the technical details of how that works to know that's an outlier. But I could see, wow, if there's engineers who say they actually can do this and we're on a path towards this, then I can start imagining how would that impact my life? What would it be like if I had a flying car? What would it be like if I had a flying self-driving car that was electric? And I can start thinking about those in broad terms. So again, these signals, we can look at academic research. We can look at global news, especially if we're talking about political trends, economic trends. We may see something happening on the other side of the planet and see how it will impact us. Again, futures, we're normally talking about medium to long term, like 10 years or more out, at least 5 years. But we can also, with global news, we can look at this for signals of what's happening in the short term. When the pandemic, the COVID-19 virus started spreading, that was a signal people could see that how it started spreading from China and into Europe and to other places. That those global news sites could be places we look for trends or signals of what could be coming. Again, fringe communities, this could be something like Reddit, it could be different clubs, it could be different subcultures. different fringe newspapers. You might see new concepts or new ideas coming out of there. And of course, social media. Maybe you just are watching your Twitter feed or X feed and seeing what's coming out of there. Any questions on these sources? No? Okay. So tools for signal scanning, again, this is going a bit further on the sources. There are trend databases that exist. There's also social listening tools, tools that you could say, hey, I want to monitor for this keyword. Maybe Google News will tell me every time there's an article on that keyword, or AI-powered scanners that are even more detailed than that. So these are other tools more specific to using these things. So I've got exercise. We went quickly through these parts, but now I'm going to have you all work on something. And I want you just to take, say, 3, maximum 5 minutes now, and identify potential signals in your area of interest or expertise. And then think about what are the 2 or 3 of those compelling signals that you would want to analyze further. And we'll stop there and then we'll share what we found. And then maybe with one of you as we talk through it, or a couple of you, let's analyze some of those signals. And as an example with the group, then see what's the source of that signal, how significant is it, what's its potential future impact. And then we can break into small groups briefly to share a bit more so everyone's got a chance to share their idea. So, and if you have questions, I'm just sitting here waiting for the next 2 or 3 minutes. But if you have questions, just jump in and tell me if you're not sure what you're looking for with signals here.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a question.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
Hi there. Uh, so when we talk about signals, uh, can we also look at like current trade trends? For instance, I work on Eurasia, like post-Soviet space, and I look at like the trade relations between Russia and all of the Central Asian republics. And from there, I gather that Russia will keep an important role as an economic partner in the medium term, let's say, despite the war in Ukraine. Would that be a signal, or it's something like less mainstream than trade links?
It's a very interesting question. So, so you're saying the changes in trade links, or just in general the fact that Russia will maintain a dominant role in the region?
No, I mean taking existing trade links as a signal. Would that qualify as a signal, or is it
So, like
something?
that's a great, no, a really good question. So the existing trade links would be okay. That's a fact. That's what we have. What I would take as the signal then is, do we see those trade links changing? Do we see something? Because the signal is telling us something new, something different. So if we say things are going to stay the same, okay, yeah, Russia is a dominant economy in the region. Russia will keep having lots of trade as a major economy in the region. That's not a change. But if we see all of a sudden China and India decide they're going to stop buying Russia's oil, or if we see, like, I don't know, maybe Azerbaijan suddenly deciding it wants to become part of NATO, or something that's like a political announcement or an economic change or change in trade patterns, or maybe, well, like what if Georgia suddenly signed a free trade agreement with the US? That would be complete surprise, no? But like, so these could be things that completely change the trade links. These would be the signals we'd look at.
Mm.
Whereas if we say, okay, Russia is dominating trade right now, it's likely to continue doing that, that's something where it's an observation of what's currently happening. But the signals would be like that tiny thing that makes us think everything might change. So if Georgia
Mm.
signed a free trade agreement with the US, and we might be thinking, well, would other countries maybe do that too? Like, are these countries that are normally trading with Russia suddenly, unexplainably maybe, trading with a totally different region of the world? Yeah, so if we see something like that happening, like maybe one country doing some complete change in its trade policy or trade links, we could take that as a signal that maybe other countries may do the same. We'd start reflecting on it, like, well, why are they doing it? Do we think any of the other countries do the same? Is it feasible or probable they might do the same? And then we could even, try to weigh the percentages based on your expertise of saying like, well, I think it's improbable that they would do this, but if they did, here's what the impact would look like. And maybe you're saying, oh, I think it's only a 5% chance of them doing this, but so we're prepared for that scenario. Here's what it would look like if it did happen.
I see. Thank you very much.
Well, so that's a great question. What else? Well, does anyone want to start sharing some of the signals they've looked at or what they've come up with?
I mean, I'm not sure whether it's a weak signal, but what I keep wondering about is that whole TikTok, etc. trend. It's
Okay.
not really weak; it's a more of a strong signal. But that self-presentation in social media and what this may eventually lead to is something I keep wondering about.
So I think this is a really interesting one. Now let's try to make it more specific. Because if we talk generally about the rise of social media, yeah, we can make and TikTok in particular, we can make general ideas of like, well, what do you think is going to happen from TikTok and the rise of its popularity? But we're talking about so many different spaces then. Like, do you want to talk about like the use of TikTok among teenagers in Germany? Or do we want to talk about like the US Congress trying to ban TikTok in the US? Yeah, like so we want to be more specific, and that way we can more easily extrapolate what will be the impact of that thing. Because otherwise, if we leave it broad, then we're kind of like, well, okay, TikTok, maybe it'll continue growing, maybe we'll keep spending more time on social media, but maybe it's hard to differentiate what we're doing with TikTok versus what we think is happening with Facebook or with X or with other media. Whereas if we can talk about a specific demographic or a specific story that happened about it, or a specific new tool they came up with, then it might be easier to project.
Okay.
Any area about TikTok you'd want to dig further into?
Well, since there's a bit of a spillover effect from the US after a few years anywhere, it makes sense to look at the source, i.e., US, although, TikTok is a Chinese phenomenon in some ways, but it got popular in the US. So I would say the impact on youth culture by means of TikTok in the US.
So
Is that
in that case,
specific
maybe
enough?
our signal, we'd want to, instead of having the question, our signal could be like TikTok is having a big impact on youth culture in the US. And then we would try to define that as much as we can, maybe saying this many million youth in the US are using TikTok. And then from there we could figure out, well, what does that mean? Does that mean TikTok's probably going to pick up in Germany too? And does that mean people will start buying and selling on TikTok? TikTok merchants are becoming popular. Does that mean people in Berlin will not insist on Bargeld and physical cash all the time? No, I'm joking. But but like what is that? So we keep going further and further onto that then. So we take that signal, like the starting point you said of like TikTok being popular among youth in the US, and exactly we extrapolate from there what else that could mean and what direction we see that going. Haldun, I see you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to come up with a signal in order to better understand if I
Please.
got the definition of a signal right. So last week I've been um, at an event by the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and the Minister of Interior, Nancy Faeser, said that amidst the technological change, and especially the use uh, the of new technologies by um, our adversaries, as she has pointed out, there needs to be a new there needs to be a re-evaluation about the relationship between security and freedom. And I found that very interesting because for me that was a signal as security and liberty is not something anymore that we are looking um, outward, how to defend our liberties, um, how to secure our liberties, but that it basically could mean that within our own society, we have to find a new relationship between security and liberty, and that also might have an important impact on the state of liberal democracy. And I think this weaves into the trend of the declaration of the end of liberalism that also now happens like since a longer time. But that basically that quote from the minister I would interpret as a signal from which on I would try to find different scenarios on what that could look like, this new future where there is a reevaluation of security and liberty.
Great. No, that's a very good direction to go in. I mean, and one could also be watching for signals of seeing, are other ministers saying similar things? Are other governments in other countries saying similar things? Do we see this as a trend just in Germany, or do we start seeing this as a trend throughout Western democracies or throughout the world? And and then, as you said, about creating the scenarios, that's something else we'll talk about briefly today, and more for next class, of looking at then how do we create these scenarios where we go and actually then imagine these things and what it would look like. And in these scenarios, we create kind of like a multiplayer role player type game in a sense, where we'll say, how would you feel if this thing was happening? You know, if we extrapolated on this idea of liberty and democracy and security and this balance between them, do we start seeing something where the government becomes stricter in a way that they're trying to protect security, but they're limiting our democracy? And maybe we have a moderate scenario, maybe we have a really extreme scenario, and we try to play out what it would feel like, and what are the factors as well, though, that could cause that to happen. And is that desirable or is that undesirable? If undesirable, like what do we do today to stop that maybe slippery slope that maybe if nobody does something in 5 or 10 years, we keep going down that road? Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you. I think that also that we are participating today in this class is already a signal for me, because it's not the only signal I'm getting that these future tools are becoming more relevant for various areas and not only for experts. Because I was participating in a summit over the weekend here in Berlin, and I was also then participating in a workshop exactly about those kind of future signals reading, and also how do you react and what kind of tools you have. So now I identified this also within our company in a bank, and that so this public policy function is also asked to read some signals and to feed this back. So I can see that those kind of antennas are spreading around, because I mean those kind of foresight tools, I think they always existed to a certain degree, but now I think it becomes more systematic, and you can see in this VUCA world, people are searching for tools and means to be more capable to navigate through the fog we have in front of us in this complex world. So that for me is a signal as well.
Good, very well pointed out. The fact that we're on this call and that more people, as you said, are talking about this kind of thing. Yeah, like the first big writer or author on futurism, or maybe not the first, but one of the best known ones, one of his big books came out in the 1980s, and he'd been working on futurism and using forecasting and futurism methodologies since the 60s. But it was something where yeah, it wasn't maybe as necessary. But as you described, in this new VUCA world, people are more concerned about this, thinking about this much more. But Michel Godet, I've got a link to his full book actually on the Miro board. And that's something where yeah, this becomes more and more necessary. And yeah, the fact we're talking about it's definitely a signal of maybe our interconnected world. And it goes beyond just the risk management office thinking about it or the strategy office talking about it. But now everybody in the bank and everybody in a big organization is being more aware of what's happening. And to the degree on the positive side, you could also think about maybe your tellers and your frontline customers dealing with customers are starting to look for signals as well now. Maybe they can start seeing signals of what are the customers asking us for? Maybe those your entry level or customer service folks or younger people in the bank, maybe they start sharing their observations back up the line too more. and start seeing new ideas for products if they use these skill sets or new ways to serve the customer. So not only negative or scary things of the VUCA world, but also could be you see new products, new opportunities, new ways to serve customers maybe coming out of this too. Anyone else want to share?
I would like, this is shorter, I cannot switch on
Please.
the camera. Thanks so much. I'm wondering, because when I'm trying to identify a signal, especially in the political and societal sphere, it always happens that I feel like, oh, this is not a novelty, because there are these kind of repetitions in society. So if I think about, I don't know, going away from multilateralism, and rather have, I don't know, isolationism or focusing on nation or back to religion. It for me it's more repetition. So how 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 does that work with the signals, or how can you help me still identify them as signals when they don't have a novelty? Or
It's really interesting how history, as I say, history often, well, history repeating and rhyming and things coming back around again and again. Um, well, one can see that maybe if they're not novel and the things they're bringing us back, say, to a traditional way of doing things, maybe they're not always a signal, but we think of, do you see one thing that might be a spark that might change the direction of the region or of politics? Or do you see it something like within a particular political party, there's a change happening that's bringing them back to an old way? As an example, like the Arab Spring, like
yeah,
when Ben Ali was overthrown in Tunisia, okay, yes, even though the current president might be back similar to what it was before the revolution, um, one could say that was like a signal. And then, of course, you started seeing changes of government throughout the region. So that first action, one could say, okay, that was definitely a political signal because it was a really big thing. If we're going way, way back in time to the French Revolution or the American Revolution, like, okay, yeah, those were big signals when you see the first big democracy movements happening when most of the global South was still colonial. You know, these independence movements and the leaders of these independence movements gaining ground, we could view these as signals. But yeah, it's maybe harder in modern times to. But how about we talk through some examples of what you're thinking of?
yeah. So I'm thinking about, for example, the changes that we have now with the, let's say, the strength of India and the changes that we have, these decisions that are not necessarily um, focusing on certain alliance, but the alliance are changing very quickly. So on certain things, India would vote something that is maybe in alliance with what we perceive as West, and on other things, not so much. So this is something that is rather new and a new way to deal with things, because you cannot rely so much anymore on the given alliances. I mean, you see it also with other players that the alliances that existed before are not the same. And this is what I'm personally interested in, to see where does this lead to, what can I understand from it, and what can we expect from it in the future, how these relations will work. Yeah, I don't know if it's more
You said
understandable
it
what I.
really clear at the beginning of that, right? That the fact in the past was that India maybe had traditional allies. Now India's
Mm,
alliances are shifting and they're supporting different sides of different issues than they used to in the past, or they're or having new alliances, new partnerships that wouldn't have been their partners in the past. And so simply what you said next, that it's not predictable anymore what India will do. Yeah.
mm,
And then so extrapolating would be like, okay, well now we can't forecast now. Well, now we can, but still like straight away that's a really interesting lesson or interesting signal, like, oh, India's foreign policy is changing. India's place in the world is different. India will isn't always as predictable or as tied to the same allies as it was. And then based on that, you can maybe you're looking at issue by issue then afterwards of
mm.
how does that impact different issues? Maybe would there have been certain allies that India would have stayed with in the past that even if it wasn't the best economic or political decision for for them as a country, but they stuck to their alliances, or maybe there's some things that play out differently in one region and another. Maybe something in an agricultural region they'll have a far different impact from the shift of alliances than people in Mumbai or in Delhi. And so we could take that and then see how it impacts different scenarios, different groups based on that initial signal, the initial idea.
Yeah, thank you. Would it be maybe also a signal, or what I see is a higher interest and investments in questions of health and from government, but also non-governmental players, due to the COVID pandemic, but also other viruses or pandemics, that there is an investment also, but also the realization that there is a potential market for that. So I see the developments in the health industry and health department is something that is giving us
so
that
massive increase in investment in the health sector is what we'd see as the signal, and then connected to that, as you said, the awareness of the problems. And then as that plays out, saying, okay, well, how will this create new market opportunities? But then also we could continue on that, not just the market opportunities. How will that impact the health and well-being of people in India overall? Or is this investment in the health sector more for pharma products for export? Or is it things that will benefit Indians as well? Like what kind of jobs will this create? Will this be what is there the right education and skill set for this? Do we need to change education to focus maybe more on biology and biotech than we have in the past? So we would then take that signal and see what are all the groups, what are all the sectors that it might impact, and try to play that through with each of them.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm getting slowly there to understand better.
I'm glad. I'm glad. And again, we'll look for some times that fit for people to have just general like Zoom office hours so we can have follow-up discussions on these. And the idea would be that I'll also create a Google form similar to what I recently just did for the first session, where you can submit a signal. So if you feel more comfortable putting it in writing or even doing a quick recording and sending that to me, then I can give you feedback as well. So that's another space where if we don't find a time we could meet or discuss it either in class or on like an office hours type session on Zoom, we can also find other spaces to give feedback. Okay, I'll go on now. So again, this was looking at just some example signals. The next part of these slides, we're not going to go through all of these today because we don't have a lot of time left, but I put these out here just as an idea to give ideas in different sectors of what could be things that we're starting to see as signals. Like AI assistants. Okay, you've got an AI tool that you're asking to help plan things. The brain-computer interface is certainly not common, but we have seen Neuralink, one of Elon Musk's companies, put one into a person and put one into a pig. So it started to exist. So what's the signal? What does that extrapolate for all of us, for the way we might live, for the way the future might look? Are we all going to be cyborgs, partly robot, partly person parts? Quantum computing, I recently gave a talk on that at IBM, and given they're one of the leading quantum computing companies, looking at like how will that impact us? How will it impact our future? These I'm just giving all as examples. So rather than stopping and discussing them in detail today, I'll just scroll through these quickly. But if you want to pick one of these, maybe as one of the homework assignment or the self projects that you want to do of saying, hey, how would this thing impact my life? How would this thing impact my industry or my job? We've got a few pages here of examples of potential signals as you're thinking of ideas of them. So again, health and well-being, we start to see gene editing as being at least starting to become available and researchers using it. We start seeing personalized medicine. Maybe for now it's limited to the very rich, but very personalized medications, gene-focused medications. We see nanotechnology that's starting to be developed, not quite used yet, but if we have tiny little things that can swim through our veins doing surgery or going into our body, there's a lot of signals of what nanotechnology might be able to bring us, even though it's not there yet, but seeing what kind of research is being done and what things are being forecast as being possible. Again, environment and sustainable solutions, fusion power, there's plenty of companies researching it. We see vertical farming starting already in some big cities. We see more and more cities moving towards being eco-cities, but not yet fully there. But what if in the future cities could be fully powered by renewable energy? Carbon capture, maybe a bit of a gray area. I see a lot of people criticizing that recently, saying that's greenwashing by the oil companies. So whether we actually are capturing CO2 or if the carbon market is partly captured by the oil market, I'm not sure, but just examples of what could be signals. We see things happening in carbon capture as we see eco-cities starting to develop, as we see vertical farms beginning to exist, and old warehouses being converted into indoor farming spaces. Redefining mobility. Yeah, again, there's researchers saying they will be able to make flying cars at some point. There's Hyperloop systems, like Elon Musk has one, I think, in Reno, Nevada, in the US he's building. The self-driving cars are existing on the roads in a limited number of cities. What if those become common? Space tourism. There's some of the super rich that are paying already to go up into low Earth orbit. What if that becomes more and more common or more accessible? Work and education, lifelong learning, virtual classrooms we have already, but does that give us a signal? I mean, we had to use it during COVID, but is that a signal of what might be to come? Will there be a time when people will only be learning the way we're learning now in this class and not going to a school or not going to a physical place? Will there be so much displacement from automation that we start having universal basic income? With more automation, will people have more and more leisure time? Or will we keep working really long hours? One could argue that compared to a lot of our ancestors 100 years ago, we probably do have more leisure time simply for all the conveniences like a dishwasher or an 8-hour workday at a factory or limits that maybe didn't exist 100 years ago. Again, and communication about what if there would be real-time translation? What if it'd be holographic communication? Instead of seeing each other on a screen, we just see each other in the classroom as holograms. What if in our social media, we're fully immersed in it? So we're actually feeling like we're living inside of it. What if there's neural communication and we just have an implant in our brain and we don't use any device? Outer space, other examples, if we're mining asteroids, colonizing Mars, exploring other planets. Yeah, so some of these things, especially on this outer, like extraterrestrial life, some of these we could debate if they're actually signals because we don't necessarily have evidence of these things yet. But there's researchers in that case saying, yeah, there might be evidence of bacteria on Mars or some form of life, not the way we think of it as people, but something like that. So these kinds of things are where we start looking at, are these signals and what would they mean for us? How would they impact us? Intelligent machines, what if there's household integration? What if there's swarm robotics, like coordinating groups of robots doing something together? What if we have exoskeletons? Like if I want to be stronger, if I snap like robot muscles to the outside of my arms to make me able to lift things. There's researchers doing some of these things. That's why I put them into the examples here. Material science, again, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. Self-governance, I know a lot of you are working on democracy and governance issues here. Blockchain voting was actually talked about as early as 2016 in Russia. Ironically, in that same year, Ukraine was also talking about it, and as mainly as a way to prevent corruption, to prevent the votes being tampered or manipulated by anyone else. So I'm going to go quickly into our techniques as we get towards the last part of this. So we look at trend extrapolation. So when we look at current trends, this is the simplest one of, hey, we see this trend of India's foreign policy being less consistent, maybe not always staying with the same ally, not going the way people expect them to do. How can we extrapolate this trend, say, in India's foreign policy into the future? Or we see TikTok becoming more popular among American youth. Yeah, how can we see that going into the future? How is that going to expand? Cross-impact analysis. How will different trends interact and influence with each other over time? Will India's foreign policy changes cross over in some way with TikTok's rise in North America? Will it suddenly be that India starts maybe saying, hey, in our foreign policy, we see American youth being impacted by a Chinese social media platform. We're going to block this in our country. Like, is there ways where these two different areas cross over each other? Then morphological analysis is looking more than just two things crossing each other, but different layers and levels and ways they cross each other. What does this mean? How can we see all these different future forecasts and different future signals? What if we mix all these signals we see together? What if I take the most likely scenario, I think, based on all these unique signals, and I try to put them all together and figure out what would happen based on that? This is where we start creating scenarios and creating very interesting scenarios, right? And then causal layered analysis, again, looking deeper into societal structures, saying, what's causing this signal? Why is this signal happening? What is the origin of the signal? Is there ways to change the origin of that signal or to change the path that we're going on based on that signal? So again, we just go back again. We do this not because we're only trying to predict or forecast a specific thing that will happen, but rather seeing what are the really far out scenarios that could happen, and for good or bad, and what are the extremes, and how do we become ready for them? And maybe some of these extremes are actually positive things that we want to plan. How can we make that more likely? How can we bring that about and make that happen? But we're using the tools from last week as well to stretch our creativity and really think of like, what could be the things that are out there that we're not thinking about today? And how can we be ready for them? How can we prepare for them? And to a degree, how can we be masters of our own ships or captains of our own ships and shape the future towards the thing we want? Maybe we imagine all the different scenarios, all the things that are possible, and how can we make it so that society, our company, our individual lives go more in the direction of what's most desirable for us, based on not just being there and accepting what happens, but thinking through the future, thinking through the options, and shaping a path towards the thing that we want. So that was me talking fast for a while. Some questions?
Yes, there was a question in the chat. Thanks. It was what constitutes a signal in terms of how far out there it is? Should it be farther out, like the hoverboard in the movie Back to the Future, or isn't something like already a reality, like something like a self-driving car? It's a bit like a weak signal.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, it's interesting. I think the way we'd use the phrase would be the opposite. Like a weak signal could be something that it's there, but it's not so likely to happen yet. So when Back to the Future came out, it was very unlikely still at that point that we'd have those floating hoverboards. And so that'd rather be a weak signal. It was something that's possible, but a weak signal, because back in the 80s, that seemed like the hoverboard idea was way out there. Whereas it'd be rather a strong signal, seeing what's going on with, say, the self-driving cars. Like, yeah, those are likely to happen. Maybe it's kind of a boring signal because we say, okay, self-driving cars are already on the road. It's not so exciting because we see that happening already. But we could see that as well as one of the more shorter term things, those strong signals. We see a strong signal, it's likely to happen. It's on the path. The technology exists for the self-driving car. Maybe it's more just regulatory barriers and people not being afraid of it or being used to it that stops it from being adopted. But the technology is mostly ready. And so that's something where we have those strong signals of things that are likely to happen in the short term, but we can also accept those weak signals and those things that we're looking at a 10-year future out. I'm not going to necessarily say more than 10 years. We can talk about 20 years, we can talk about 30 years, but really 10 years is enough that we can consider almost everything may have changed. I say almost everything may have changed, again, with the Facebook example. From when Facebook was brand new to when Facebook had 1 billion users, that was 10 years. So a 10-year time span really is a space where almost everything could change. If you look at the history of the Soviet Union from the time the Berlin Wall fell to going back 10 years before that, when the Soviet armies were marching through Afghanistan, that was a massive change. In the early 80s, people thought of the Soviet Union as invincible almost. And then 10 years later, the Cold War ends. So 10 years is more than enough for the whole world to change. So I don't talk usually about longer spans than that. You can, but I usually look at 10 years when I'm talking about futurism. Anything else, we can use these trends and extrapolating these trends for forecasting, but I would say it's more of a forecast. We're talking about less than 10 years. Other question? Oh, no worries, Marjorie. I see you're signing off. Okay. go on from here. So for closing today, we're just going to go through a scenario, just to give an idea of how we do these scenarios. We're only going to go for another 10 minutes today, though maybe in 5 minutes of this exercise, and then I'll explain the hands-on exercise afterwards. I see there's a hand raised, though. Do you want to ask your question quickly?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to steal time, but the example on the Soviet Union made me think of,
Right.
like accessible and not accessible countries. Like as I said, I do research on countries that often lack transparent data. Sometimes we don't trust the data, the official data that is spread. So in a context so uncertain, how can we be sure that our signals are based on actual facts and figures?
That's a challenging thing, and that's where I think it's going to partly take you being someone who's an expert in your own field of looking at your space and weighing that, saying, hey, this thing is maybe you see a hint of a political change happening in a given country. And based on your expertise, you're going to have to think of like, well, is that likely to make a change? Maybe outsiders who don't know that country or that region won't be able to assess it even, but maybe you have enough expertise of a particular place that you could say, hey, I think that this political leader speaking up or getting covered in the media or being arrested or whatever's happening is enough of a flashpoint that it's going to make a big change in the country. Or maybe you have a collection of small things that you've seen all these things separately, and someone else not watching that space maybe would have only seen some of them. So collectively, you're saying these things together are things that will make an impact. So it might be all of them are weak by themselves, but there's so many things happening that you see that's likely to make a change. And I think that's really going to vary situation by situation. And as Sylvia wrote in the notes, some of these things will maybe be a weak trend in one country, but a strong trend in the other. Like maybe the self-driving car is likely to happen soon in California, but maybe the Nairobi traffic Sylvia's driving in might take a few more years till it gets there, right? So things could be weak or strong depending on where they are. But again, they might happen much faster than we think. Maybe Nairobi will have smart cars sooner than California. Who knows? And again, the fall of the Soviet Union, it was something that so few people, if any, predicted. Yeah, and it was so fast. So, or relatively for the grand scheme of history. And so it's always a challenge, but I think it goes to like you looking at the fields that you're an expert on, or if you want to work on a field and you're not quite the expert on it, of talking to others who are experts in that space and trying to figure out what the most likely consensus could be. Thanks for the question. So I think rather this example, we're just going to talk through it very quickly. The idea of this was giving a scenario of the connected mind. What if in 2050, I said I was only going to do 10 years out, but we're looking many more years out. What would it look like if we had brain-computer interfaces? What if we just had digital systems, AI systems we're connected to, personalized medicine all the time, virtual education, because we've got chips in our brain anyway. You communicate mind to mind. You don't carry a phone anymore. How would that look like in our lives? And so with that, think of like, what would that look like with the day in the life? Maybe in your morning, you wake up based on optimized AI sleep analysis. Maybe you collaborate in a virtual office. You don't actually go anyplace. You're just in your virtual office. Your health checks, you have real-time health checkups constantly. In the evening, you have a global meditation session to share your experiences and connect with loved ones. What would this look like? I give this an example of saying, yeah, we start with the idea of we have a chip in our brain and we're all connected to each other, all connected to a global network. The idea of the exercise would be, how would life be? What would you guys think? What would all of you think of if life was something like that? What would be concerns or worries you might have about it? Well, some could be the privacy concerns, right? how we protect individual thoughts, memories, equality of access. Maybe some people have more access to these systems than others do. What if only the super rich have neural enhancements and everyone else doesn't? Are those people suddenly having access to so much more intelligence than now? Or is it kind of the same? Because right now the elite go to top schools and others don't. And then identities. Identity and autonomy, how does this affect human independence, human decision making if we're tied in with this kind of a neurochip? And this is just an example I give of if we create these scenarios, we go through, we really think about what would it be like? So what I'll be doing, asking you to do in the homework, or I hate to say homework for adult learners, but yeah, the interactive task would be to think for yourself of whatever signal it is that you've thought of earlier today during our session. Pick one of those signals and really think of what would it be like if that signal what would that signal lead into? What could that look like 10 years from now or more than that even? And if we kept going down the path of that signal, what would life be like in 10 years? And what would your daily life be like? Or you could think of something specific for your company or your employer or wherever you're working or whatever project you're working on. But I want you to create a real vivid picture for yourself of what would that look like? What new concerns would you have? What benefits would you have? What would be good? What would be bad? What would be different about life? And when we do this with signals, we do this just for one as a practice. So then when we get together next week or when we meet during office hours, we can talk through that signal and what it was like. But then you can have this as a tool in your tool belt. So as you look at signals, you're not just saying, hey, gives me an idea towards what trends might be going, but let's make it really real. Let's imagine not just like, oh, people are buying more of X product or like trade between these two countries is increasing. Not just thinking about the short term, but when we have this 10-year imagination, we start thinking, what would it be like and imagining life in that setting? And that gives us something more real, more tangible, and maybe more detailed and more nuanced. We might think more about the solutions, the needs, or what needs to happen either to make that thing happen or to prevent that thing from happening, depending if it's good or bad. So I'll put that and a link to that on the Miro board. And I think we'll probably also send that out by email, but I'll create a Google form where you can submit those. And that way I can give feedback to people. But then also, if you want to share it on the Miro board, you can also create a post for it on the Miro board. And that way people can give feedback or comments to each other's posts as well. So you can either send it to me or post it on the Miro board, in which case people give comments and feedback to each other too. Any questions on that?
Sounds pretty straightforward.
All right, great. With that, the other slides here, you guys have been sent almost all of these, but we're probably I think most of these we're going to leave then for next session. But again, we talk about the benefits of signals, like informed decision-making, finding new opportunities for innovation, risk mitigation, having a competitive advantage. And again, signal identification, how we look at when we're using this within an organization, not just finding the signals, but signaling what is the impact of that signal? How will it impact my organization? And then how does that fit with my strategy? Does my organization have a strategy first off? And if we do, hopefully we do, how will this signal impact it? Should we change our strategy? Will this change the direction we need to go? Should we have more of an innovation focus? Do we need to do more R&D to be in line with what this new signal might bring to us? And this innovation doesn't only have to be technology. It can also be, do we understand our society? Do we understand the people around us? Is there social innovation we can work on as well? Things that can help us understand our customers or the people we serve better. Again, how we integrate this into our strategy. We try to have regular reviews, maybe quarterly or annually in our strategic planning sessions. Try to bring these up and say, hey, these are the signals I see. Here's signals that I think could impact our company. And maybe next quarter, maybe you still see that signal is still important, so you bring it up again. Or maybe that signal seems to have been a weak signal and not so likely, and you don't bring it up again in the future. With cross-functional teams, you plan scenarios. Again, when you have people from different disciplines, different backgrounds working together, you're more likely to come up with different solutions and different problems as well that will come up in the scenario. if everybody in the team is all from communications, you're going to be thinking about problems a communications officer faces. But if you have engineers, if you have field workers, if you've got people from all different backgrounds there, you'll think of different scenarios, different details of those scenarios, and different ways to foresee both potential opportunities and potential dangers that could come from that. And then, of course, being agile, being quick at responding. So resources for further reading, again, there's research workshops with your team. Like I do these kind of workshops like we're doing today in a longer form or over multiple weeks. There's professional networks like the Association of Professional Futurists. I'm a member of that, and there's a lot of really great experts in there. One can either read their content, join that organization, ask others there to lead workshops on there. And so far as literature, on the Miro board, I've given you lots of books and articles already, but I can, of course, send you more and more materials. But this is how to keep going with these futurist resources. So with that, I think we had a fair amount of people drop off already. And I'm going to close that up at this point. There is more slides, and I believe you've been sent all the slides by email already. Those of you who just joined today or weren't on the email list, I can send you the complete set of slides still too. Just send me a message and remind me if you didn't get them. And we're going to look at over the next, I think 3 weeks from now is our last session, or 2 weeks from now, rather. In between, we'll have at least one, if not two, sessions where we'll just have office hours. So if you missed the first session and have questions, or if you want to dig deeper into the materials we've talked about today, we'll create spaces where we'll have smaller groups and more time to talk, more time to go through in detail and give feedback. Anything else?
No,
All right,
I just
it's been a
want to say
pleasure.
thank you very much, Peter, and also for posting the video last time. It was very good to rewatch it.
I'm glad.
So that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. And thank you all for coming today.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, have a good
Bye.
day.
Thank you as well. Bye.